It's an Echo CS370 with a 16-inch bar on it. Mostly used for, actually it's only used for wood cutting, brush clearing, tree felling. Even with the 16-inch bar, you can still fell a good sized tree with probably about a 20-inch diameter on it. I'm always going to make sure we got some sort of gloves on. I prefer using just disposable, not necessarily EMS gloves unless they're double glove, but just a thicker glove, just to keep the oil and gas and dirt off my hands. One of the first things we always want to check is if it has plenty of fuel or oil in it. I always use the fuel recommended by the manufacturer. In this case, I use 50-to-1 ethanol free. I do not recommend using ethanol containing gasoline from the gas station because it heats up the components, which causes problems on down the road. Alright, it's got bar, oil, and it's got fuel. This is the air filter. We're going to take the air filter off, the air filter cover off. In the classroom scenario, we'd have different saws so everybody else could do this. They can get hands-on. There would also be a PowerPoint available to show pictures or videos of operation. Given the current climate of things, that was not able to do all this. So this is what we're doing. Air filter's got a little bit of dirt on it, but it looks good. I'm usually content with just blowing that out with an air compressor, just make sure it doesn't have stuff packed in it. Make sure the carburetor doesn't have any gum in it. It's not gummed up, everything looks like it's good, it's nice and clean, it's down in there. Operate the choke. Yep, got good movement. Choke moves just fine. I prefer to keep the choke closed on my chainsaw just to reduce the chance of dirt and contaminants getting into the carburetor when I store it. Between cutting firewood during the summer and the fall and just general maintenance around here with trees and brush clearing, this thing does not have a very long off season. Okay, some fire service chainsaws and wildland chainsaws will be a full wrap where the bar will go all the way around here. That's for making it easier using the offhand. Obviously with this type of wrap, which I'm also checking to make sure that the handle's secure. With this type of wrap, it's really hard to do working the offhand like that. But it does have its advantages to having a full bar wrapped around it. We'll play with that more later. Alright, make sure the brake works. Brake works fine. I'm going to face this way. Oh yeah, check the primer bulb. Primer bulb doesn't have any leaks. It's not broken. I'm going to turn this way to make sure so you can see it. Spin the nuts off. I'm taking the nuts off. I'm also looking at the exhaust port, which is here on the front, making sure there's not a lot of carbon buildup, no debris blocking it. Release the brake. Pull that part off the cover. Take a look at this. It's got some dirt in here from being used the other day, but the brake ring right here looks good. It's not broken. Doesn't have any obvious wear. Nothing I'm concerned about. This is the chain or the bar length, the bar tension adjuster that pulls the bar in and out to tighten the chain. It looks good. It's got a nice coating of oil on it. which tells me this thing's getting well oiled. It's a little bit bent right there from throwing the chain, which happens, but it's not. It doesn't look like it's going to affect the performance any. But I'm going to keep an eye on that. If it looks like there's more wear than what's supposed to, if it keeps getting worse, increased amount of wear, then I'm going to look at getting this part replaced. All right, so all this looks good. If this thing was excessive, a lot of times you'll see a chainsaw that has, especially after the other shift got done with a fire or the thing's been out on a wildland deployment, and that thing will be black with oil and sawdust all in here. I like to get all that cleared out. In fact, use about once a year or after a lot of heavy use. I'll take this and the bar, the handle. I'll strip this thing down and I will wash it in hot water. I'll wash it in hot water with Dawn soap just to get it cleaned up, because that having a bunch of sawdust and oil and stuff all caked up around here, it inhibits the heat release that comes from the bar and the chain, which can adversely affect the performance. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pop the bar off. As you can see, this is an aftermarket bar. My first bar, well, let me explain the bar, then we'll get into that story. So we've got an aftermarket bar here. It's still pretty well oiled. You can see the paint's wearing off of it, but that's not something I'm too concerned about. I'm going to make sure the sprocket here in the end is still free spinning. And it is. It's good. It's not hung up. I don't feel the ball bearings or the roller bearings inside. Sometimes you can feel those. I don't feel any problem with those. There's a kind of a hole here and on this side too. I want to make sure that's not clogged up. So something I am going to look at is I'm going to look down the length of it. I want to make sure that the channel and the edges of it aren't flared out from wear. Check that on both sides. It looks good. It's nice and smooth. Always be careful, and this is the importance of wearing gloves. This is safety notice. Always be careful when running your hand along the top edge of a bar like this, because this thing can get, if it's flaring out, the corner of it can get razor sharp, and you can slice up your finger pretty good on it. So I'm always careful about checking that, touching that bar, and running my fingers along it. I'm using an aftermarket bar because the original bar that came with the chainsaw is actually, it's probably, I think, my second aftermarket bar. The original got clamped off in a tree one time that I was cutting down, and that's something to notice. I'm going to look down this bar to make sure it doesn't have any type of permanent curvature to it, because a bar that's got a permanent curve, the chain's going to wear bad on it, and it's just going to be generally useless. As far as it being upside down, you'll notice when I pulled it off, I rotate it out after every few uses, after so many hours, just to make it nice even wear on the bar. And so I had it upside down because I'd worn it for that long on the right side up. So that was something I did to it recently. Checking out the chain, I want to make sure I'm going to look at the entire length of the chain. I'm going to look at every length and make sure there are no broken links, no broken, nothing at all. It's not rusted, it's in good condition. It's got, if I was touching this barehanded, I'd be getting a little bit of oil on my hands because it's well lubricated. So I'm going to check the dog, make sure it's still nice and tight. This is great for when you need to dog into a piece of wood and hold it, or sideways, dig in, and that kind of helps act as a fulcrum for working your saw in a piece of wood. Now I'm going to check the sprocket. And it's hard to tell in here, but what I'm looking at the teeth that's behind this wheel, because that's what drives the chain. And I'm making sure that it doesn't have any unnecessary grooves that it shouldn't. And make sure this is free spinning like it's supposed to be. Once again, I apologize, it's sweaty out here, or it's hot out here and it's sweaty. So, something else I'm going to look at, this is this catches the chain when it gets thrown off. I call it a chain guard. This thing is pretty gnarled up, but it's still functional enough. You know, it's bent, but it's not damaged. It'll function properly. I'm also going to look, see how much dirt and sawdust and oil's built up around. It's not too bad. That's about as much as you would expect for use. You know, once again, when this gets all caked up, or after a lot of cutting, this will get caked up. It needs to be cleaned out. The engine of the chainsaw generates heat, but the chain moving through the bar also generates heat through friction. That's why after you put on a new chain and you start it up and run it for a while, the chain will get loose and sag. It's because that chain's getting hot and the metal's expanding, so it's getting lengthy. Part of that, the way to keep the chainsaw cool is keeping all the dirt and oil out of here. So I always check it and make sure that it's relatively clean and not caked up. I'm also going to look at the vanes in this heat sink, make sure there's not dirt caked in there, because that's where the engine is. I mean, that's the engine and that's where the cylinder is. So I'll make sure that's all cleaned out. It's cleaned out on the front. You know, it's got some oil and some dust on it, but it's, like I said, nothing that's detrimental to the operation of the chainsaw. But it is something that I take a look at. The automatic oiler, I will check it when I start it up. I'll make sure the thing's leaving a streak of oil on the ground when I run it. There's a sheen of oil all over this thing, and so I know that it's getting lubricated properly. There's no gunk, sawdust, or other debris that is getting bogged down inside of these ports. So everything looks good on it. It looks like it's ready to go. We'll go ahead and put it back together. Put the bar on. Make sure the chain's the right direction. I have seen a chainsaw on a fire truck with the chain backwards in the other shift, because you know it's always the other shift. But, you know, we can't figure out why it wasn't cutting. We need to call the shop and get on there and the chain is backwards. I also want to make sure my chain is sharp. That's something I do during use, after use, before use. This chain is, I know it's sharp because I just sharpened it right after I used it the last time. So I know this chain's good to go. Something to note on fire service chainsaws, the ones at the Fort Worth Fire Department have carbide steel chain on them, and those cannot be sharpened according to the equipment shop. And so if those go, for some reason, if those go dull or fail in any way, they're missing teeth, they should need to be replaced. Pull this thing tight, make sure it locks in good. And I like doing this with it laying down. I know guys there's some like doing it with it sitting upright and some do it laying over, but I usually lay it over, because usually when I'm changing out a chain and doing any type of adjustment like this, I'm usually out in the woods, and it is a pain to do that any other way. I'm going to use the scrunch, which is this tool, to get that pin. Use the scrunch to get that pin in the right place, so I can adjust the bar. There we go, got a good sitting in there. use the nuts to hold the guard in place, the brake in place. I'm going to speed through this because I think I've run out of time on the video, but what my phone will do. So tighten all this down. I'm going to use the scrunch to tighten the chain. You notice how the chain's real loose? We don't want that. As the chains, as I'm tightening it, I want to make sure it's lined it's going into the grooves of the bar. A little bit tighter than I like. So then now I'll sit here and adjust it, get it to the tension I like, tighten down the nuts. Yep, there you go, about to get the guitar string tight. And this saw is going to be ready to go this afternoon. All right. In the regular classroom setting, I'd be able to pass these parts around, have everybody look at them, or we'd all be standing around the table where we could sit there and everybody in the class would be able to get their hands on this to allow for just some hands-on psychomotor skills. I'd also have a PowerPoint for more, because if it's a bigger class, not everybody would be able to see this. So those are some modifications that I'd be making to this class. Then we'd go out and have a skills afterwards where we'd actually practice running the saw, using the saw. Written tests would be over saw safety, saw maintenance, pulling from stuff that's off the PowerPoint that would meet the learning objectives from the class. So that's it. Thank you.